Let's go from this to this. New Type is a fast and reliable source of Gunpla supplies in the US. For my fellow Canadians, Argama Hobby offers the largest stock of kits, tools, and paints. I'd like to thank my sponsor, Argama Hobby, for sending this kit over to me. In this video, I'll be showing you how I sand and organize my Gunpla parts before painting so that I know which parts are what during final assembly. So usually what I do before starting any new kit is I check if there's any junk parts, because if there are any junk parts, I cut that out of the runners right away so that I don't accidentally put work into it. And I guess because this is a new kit, there are no junk parts, so that's fine. Normally, I make the first cut with my very heavy-duty Tamiya nippers before using my God hand nippers, which give a cleaner cut but can break really easily. I've broken 2 of mine. But because this is a tiny little RG kit, the parts are smaller and there's less chance for the God hands to break. Also, if you're wondering about any of the products I use throughout this video, you can find it on my Amazon storefront. I want to just show you also how heavy duty these Tamiya nippers are. They cut so well, and you don't have to worry about ruining your God hands. And I actually cut it with the tip and it was still fine. I have a big tray and I cut out the runner letter just because I'm too lazy to, write it on a piece of paper or something. I put the parts into little corners. I'll just do that with the rest of the parts. So when I do the cut, I usually come from underneath the runner. I find it's a little easier to see what I'm cutting rather than going like this. I mean, I don't think it's a big deal, but also I use the smooth part of the blade against whatever part I'm cutting. So I wouldn't cut it like this because the smooth part of the blade will give you a cleaner cut and you can see how much you're cutting between the part and the runner. Yeah, the smooth part of the blade always against the part. I also try not to snip the part right off too fast because especially with these little parts, they can just fly away. So I make the cut quite slow and just let it drop. For any of the really small clear parts, I actually just leave them on the runner until the very last moment where I have to top coat, and then I'll cut it out and put it right onto the alligator clip and then top coat it because I've lost one too many little clear parts. So for cleaning up the parts, you can see I've left a little bit of a gate here. And to be honest, for an RG kit, I really don't go all crazy and be super clean and cut multiple layers like I normally do. I could really just make one cut and it doesn't come out perfectly clean, but because this is a relatively new kit, a lot of these nubs aren't gonna show, and I can see actually some of the nubs are undergated. So I'm pretty rough with the cut, to be honest. And again, I am gonna go in with a little sanding. So normally in my videos, I talk a lot about cutting and sanding techniques, which I will get to later in this video. However, I don't ever really have time to talk about what is probably one of the most commonly asked questions in all of my full build videos, which is how do I know which part is what when I get to final assembly because I've cut everything off of the runners. I'm going to provide 3 tips. The first one is I do organize my parts by runner, ABCD, throughout the whole painting process. And you're going to see how I do it throughout this video. So I do know at least which parts are from which runner. Okay, sure. But then there's still a lot of parts within a runner. So how do you know which part is which within the runner? That leads me to my second point, which is that the entire painting process forces you to handle each part individually so many times that by the time you get to final assembly, you're going to already recognize that part because you've handled it so many times. So what I mean is from the very beginning, you're going to cut the part off of the runner, which is what I'm doing right now. And then you've cut off the nub marks, then you've sanded it, probably multiple times with a rougher and then a finer grit, and then you've held that part, clipped it onto an alligator clip, stuck it onto the foam, and you've primed it, painted it, multiple layers, depending on what colors you're doing. You might have taken that part to mask, to apply a decal, to panel line, and then to top coat, and then to remove each part individually by hand from the alligator clips. So by the end of this whole painting process, you've handled every individual part at least probably 10 times. By the time you see a picture of it in the manual while you're doing final assembly, you would probably have an idea of what it looks like in your head. Okay, so to sum up, my second point, it just comes naturally as part of the process. And I think the fear of not recognizing a part during final assembly is more for beginner painters who haven't done it yet. And imagining assembly without runner numbers can be kind of daunting. But don't worry, because this is something you'll realize with experience and practice. That's why it's always better to start off small with SD or HD kits so you can get a taste of the process before moving on to bigger kits. Now let's get on to my third tip. So maybe you still feel like one runner has a lot of parts to fumble through, but my last tip is to do your final assembly from big to small parts. The bigger parts are always easier to find, so I always assemble the weapons first. They're usually very easy to find, usually only one piece of each part, and you've gotten rid of the biggest parts in your tray. And then I usually do the legs. The legs hold the bigger pieces, and so I usually do the legs, the body, the arms, and then the head. And the head has the smallest parts. So you're going from the biggest to the smallest parts. Also, note that once you've assembled the weapons and the legs, there's not that many pieces left to go through. So at the beginning, it might be a little harder, but as you get going, it's really all downhill and smooth sailing from there. I do want to add a little side note that this process is slightly different when building resin kits. I'm just talking about Bandai plastic kits here. So that is my very long, extended answer to the question, how do you know which parts are what during final assembly? And I hope that helps. Okay, so I've got an important part here. I am gonna try to cut this a little bit more clean. I mean, I think everyone's gonna be a little bit different, but sometimes there are these really big nubs. And of course, I've left the nub really big because I know this part is gonna be important and maybe visible, maybe not, I'm not sure. But I have this really big chunk here, and I've already done it a little bit, but I might clip off the sides a little bit just so I can kind of see what's going on. Do this in layers. Whenever I cut close to the part, I never push deep into the part. I kind of go like this. And instead of pushing in, I cut kind of up a little bit. Of course, not exaggerated to that extent. And then I would go in with my art knife just because I'm trying to be very careful here and I don't want to cut too deep. And I will make this part as smooth as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to sand it after. So you can see there aren't any stress marks. Although that doesn't matter too much because I'm going to paint, but I do want to try to avoid stress marks because sometimes it kind of indents into the part. I also usually cut parallel to the part. I cut like this rather than like this, although of course there are some exceptions, but I find this gives a cleaner cut. This is how I organize my parts before painting. I do try to separate all the colors that are similar. I don't put them side by side so I don't get them mixed up. This tray is doable because this is an RG kit. Obviously, if the kit is bigger, you might need a bigger tray or two of them. I like to streamline, if possible, what I do. So I've done all of the clipping. Now I will get to sanding. I should also really look at if there's any seam lines that I want to remove, but I feel like because this is a pretty new kit, this piece normally it's 2 pieces like this. I've looked in the manual and this piece is going to go something like this behind here, but I feel like because this part doesn't have the horrible seam line, I think it's going to be acceptable for me to not remove the seam line in the back because that could just naturally be how it's supposed to look. To be honest, this is just supposed to be a light build, so I'm not going to go really crazy with doing too much work if possible. Here. All right, so let's take a little bit of an intermission. Recently, there was an Amazon Prime Day sale and I bought a few things that I wanted to unbox with you guys, but I just wanted to tell you before I do that the boxes were all already open because my daughter insists on opening everything that we get delivered. So I had to negotiate with her a little bit and I said, okay, we're gonna open the box, but we're not gonna take anything out, okay? And because I wanted to do that with you guys. So I don't actually need all of this stuff right now, but just because of the sale, I bought all of it. So let's take a look at it. I actually have this mat when I was in Korea. And instinctively you would think to buy something big, but I really like this mat because it's blank in the back. So when I film and I want just like a clean slate, I can film on here. When I do need anything like lines or whatever, to be honest, I usually don't, then I can use this side. But what I love about this mat is I can use it inside of the booth, I can use it outside of my booth, and I can use it in front of my computer. So I really prefer a small little one. Also got a sonic cleaner. And this is actually the same size as what we had before in Korea. It's got a little tray. I don't think I would really be using this because this is mostly for cleaning the airbrush, or I sometimes mix my paints in here because I don't have a paint mixer. And that would be the temperature. Sometimes I mix my paints in here as well, but it's really mostly for cleaning the airbrush. This is actually the same brand as the drill that we used in Korea, but it's a lot nicer. This is for drilling resin when I'm putting in wires and magnets and stuff. Charger works. Okay, so I'm on to sanding now. I think what you need to do before you work on any kit is decide to what finish are you going to build and paint this kit. For me, this kit is not like a master super clean finish. It's really kind of just a for fun, light healing kit. In Korean, they call it a healing kit. And it's really, to be honest, for me to just get back into building and painting with a brand new setup. I think that's really important to do, to keep in mind and save your energy for those kits that you want to have like a really awesome finish on. Okay, so I'll have the manual next to me. If there's any num marks that I'm kind of contemplating whether I want to sand it. When I look at it in this crotch part, I feel like the nubs really are not gonna show. For this part in particular, I'm not gonna sand this undergate. I will remove these mold lines with really just the usual way that I sand, but I do make sure I remove it from especially the weapons, even if I don't do it for like say every single part. I start off with a 400 grit and use long strokes when I sand. I find it a little less exhausting than a lot of short strokes. Sanding is actually my least favorite part of painting Gunpla, so I try to make it as easy on myself as possible. I'm very light-handed so that I don't sand away the curves of the part. Also, because it's a round part, I use a sanding sponge. I'm always checking as I sand to make sure I don't overdo it. It's okay to sand away 70% of the mold line because I will go in with my 600 grit now. Finally, I go in with an 800 sponge to smooth out the part. I actually prefer the 1000 sponge stick, but I can't believe I didn't buy any before leaving Korea and didn't realize how hard it would be to find in Canada. For the flat parts, I do the same thing, 400, 600, 800, but with sanding sticks to keep the edges of the part sharp. Mold lines on weapons are very prominent, so I sand a lot more than I would for numb marks. Also, notice that I turn the part around so that I keep the sanding even. It's a little easier than constantly rotating my sanding stick. There's other ways you can do it, but that's what I do here. I also have a little wet wipe to catch and wipe the excess dust off of my brush after sanding. The brush can get a lot of static and can feel like I'm just wiping the dust back onto the part. I also wear a mask. Ta-da! All done. Let's get on to clipping. I clipped the runner letter first on the top corner. It's really important to make sure the parts are clipped on tight. The airstream from the airbrush can blow the parts off very easily if the hold is flimsy. After clipping the part, I pinch the end of the clip to strengthen the hold and do a little shake test, especially for bigger parts. Also, notice I stick the bamboo sticks in very straight. You don't want them sticking out left and right willy-nilly because parts can get knocked off the clips when you carry the foam around or put them side by side. I learned that from experience. Sometimes you might get a part where you feel like everywhere is going to show and there isn't really any obvious peg, in which case I kind of just clip it where it'll be easy. And then when I paint, I'm going to, paint this whole part and then let it kind of partially dry. And then I'll clip it somewhere else, like either here or here. And then I'll just spot paint the other side where the peg was. Sometimes there are parts that you might not really know where to clip. Sorry, I just had like chips, ketchup chips. It's so Canadian, but I miss ketchup chips so much when I was in Korea. So anyways, so you can use the clip in really a variety of ways, but sometimes I will just like shove it in. And then it's really nice and tight. And because I don't think the inner side of this part is gonna show, so that's why I would clip it like this. Okay, so I've got one set of runner on a third of this foam, and I'm hoping to maybe get 2 more sets of runners in. I remember when I painted my first Gunpla, it took me almost 30 minutes to clip 1 runner's worth of parts. I was really fumbling trying to figure out where to clip. I actually talk about how I started painting Gunpla and my first experience at a Gunpla studio in a 50-minute visual podcast on my Patreon, where I have a lot more exclusive content. I upload a podcast every month talking about Gunpla topics and the behind the scenes of my YouTube channel. Check it out at patreon.com/FrostIsSnow. It really helps to support this channel. These really little parts that might be a little hard to clip. You can use these smaller alligator clips and get right in there. So I've got some little parts here which I can't get clipped on too easily. Some of them have a little peg in the back, but some of them don't, like this one. I'm gonna be making my plat plate sheet to stick them onto. I've got a bunch of spare plat plate. I chose the worst quality one. Double-sided tape. I don't need it to be this thick, but this is the only double-sided tape that I have right now, so. And only the pieces that don't have a little peg in the back. Okay, so that's it. This is a little weird. I wonder why there's an uneven number. Oh my god, I wonder if I'm missing one. Well, let's see. Oh no, one is clipped. Oh my gosh, that freaked me out. I was like, why is it uneven? I had clipped it on, but I thought it seemed a little hard to clip, so my goodness. That's why with these RG kits, I really freak out when I see anything that seems like it's missing. Okay, there we go. And then I'm just gonna do this. And that's how I'll paint it. If you need more room, you can even double side this and put it on the back as well. Go here along with the rest of the runners. Thank you so much for joining me as I journey through my builds, and watch out for the next video where I will start painting this bad boy up. We're checking out a new cafe he wanted to try. We used to come to this place, but then they closed down and then a new place opened up. 아이고 진짜. Oh, shaved ice. Summer shaved ice. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters who allow me to build, paint, and produce videos while not having to worry about making a living at the same time. Patreon is a way for anyone to support their favorite creator and content. You can also join us on Discord to chat with me and fellow Gunpla hobbyists. Check it out at patreon.com/frostsnow. Thanks for watching.